My name is Stephanie Mehta. I am the CEO and Chief Content Officer of Fast Company and Inc. And we are so excited to be here today. Thank you again for joining us. And I see a lot of sunglasses out there. Do everything you can to stay cool. Make sure you drink some water. I'm going to introduce these fabulous panelists. I am joined on stage by Gillian Zucker, who is the CEO of Halo Sport and Entertainment, which is the parent of the LA Clippers, the Intuit Dome, and a couple of other sports properties. And Maria Papaleo, who is UX Manager, AWS Infrastructure Services. So welcome, Gillian and Maria. So how many Clippers fans do we have out there?
Oh, yeah.
How many AWS fans do we have out there?
Got a few of those, too.
Right,
Guy in the back.
show of hands, how many of you came here to Canva Create to learn how to be more creative? Very cool. And how many of you are here to learn how to be more productive? Amazing. Well, you are in luck because this session today is going to have something for everyone. We're going to talk about creativity, we're going to talk about technology, we're going to talk about productivity, and above all, we're going to talk about leading through change and thriving in a tech-driven world. But before we do that, I don't think your job titles necessarily do justice to what you do every day. So Gillian, tell us what you do as CEO of Halo.
Well, Halo consists of 4 properties: the LA Clippers, the Intuit Dome, which is just down the street. You can see it from here, the brand new home of the LA Clippers. The Kia Forum, which is actually on the other side of us, that hosts over 100 concerts a year in the LA area, and then our San Diego Clippers, which is our G League affiliate. So my job is to oversee the many talented people who operate these facilities on a daily basis and bring joy and excitement and transformative event experiences to people regionally and nationally and globally.
And Maria, tell us what you do at AWS Infrastructure Services.
So I run a team that is responsible for helping network engineers and network professionals and people that are doing IT infrastructure things build spaces and solutions that help them run their companies, their businesses most efficiently using cloud services. So things that you use every day on the internet for your job, and people that input to your job most likely run in AWS. Their content is hosted somewhere, that's with us. It's accelerated somewhere, that's with us. And it has an address that you type www, and most of the time that is through us as well. So a lot of the things that make the internet go beep and boop are kind of powered by my team.
And what do you do specifically to help that?
So I oversee the team that we're talking about the strategy of how we're thinking about the internet in the future in 3 to 5 years. I help them generate the creative space so that they're helping customers like yourself and people around you make decisions better. So I'm more of an idea catalyst and a protector of space to be wrong.
So we're going to talk a lot about leading through change and technology, but I want to ask each of our panelists, what's your favorite productivity tool? Gillian, is there a technology that you love to use that helps you do your job better?
I love Teams. Our organization's owned by Steve Ballmer. He bleeds Microsoft, so I think all of their technologies are amazing. But I think the Teams tool has done something to just make us so much more productive and to make communication so easy. And during events now, we just sort of have a group chat that has, I don't know, probably 70 people on it that all need to know certain things in real time, and it's a very easy place to be able to do that. Of course, the technology that allows you to have video conferencing is fantastic, but there's so many different nuances to that tool that I think is special.
And we're going to come back to Steve in a minute. Maria, what's your favorite productivity tool?
So I've been thinking about this. I have 2 answers. The first one is I love any type of digital whiteboard space that has an AI integration to it because there's so much collaboration and what-if idea bat swinging that my team does, that somewhere where we can just find that place to be messy before we have more structured ideas. But my analog tool that I love is a cup of coffee. It's one of those things that both helps me be a little bit more focused, it helps me kind of like center, but it also helps me connect with my team a little bit more when I'm just like, hey, let's grab a coffee and talk about what you're thinking. It kind of puts the barriers down.
I love that. Gillian, you mentioned that your team is owned by Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft. You've built what is considered to be one of the most advanced technological stadiums, arenas in the country. How does that excellence to technology in the fan experience then translate into how you use technology in your everyday operations at Halo?
I think the big driving principle when we were building the building was every time a technology would come to us that would be interesting or unique or would make us say, wow, I think people would really like this, we'd ask ourselves the question, does it make the experience better? Does it help eliminate lines? Does it make something faster? Does it add to your experience while you're there? Is it more fun? Things like that were the kinds of questions we asked ourselves. And I think with our internal technology, we've been doing the same thing. That there are so many technologies that you use that when you take a step back and you think about them, there might be a better way. Or you could take two technologies and eliminate one of them and just use one, and then you become sort of more versed in the one that you are still using. So we took an approach that really helped us to streamline the many, many tools. And technology evolves so quickly, so if you're not doing that on an annual basis, you do end up with things that are duplicative.
And we're going to come back to this whole notion of the rapid pace of change and the way technology is evolving so quickly, and how we all as leaders in organizations have to respond to that. Maria, you talked about the importance of AI tools, but you have a very, very interesting philosophy about the use of AI. You say that you advise designers to go back to the basics when it comes to AI. What does that mean?
So what that means is that, okay, I'm going to take a step back before I say what that means. In the world of AI, the expectation of the designer is now so different than it was before we started using these tools. Your expectation is to do more, better, faster, with higher outcomes, almost at any cost. But to go back,
who's that expectation coming from? From corporate, from?
Oh my gosh, it's from managers, corporates, your consumer itself. There's just like this expectation layer because people perceive AI tools as, well, anybody can do it now. So now you are the professionals who do it better. So going back to the basics is one of the things that differentiate us as designers in this space, because we have the critical skills, the understanding of heuristics, laws, principles that inform our spaces so that we can make evaluations of the correctness, the goodness, the velocity, the kind of helpfulness of the space. Because what the AI tool often misses sometimes, if we're feeding it partial data or if the model is based off of something that's mostly correct, is the closing the gap between the customer or the user's intent and what they want. And so we're here now as kind of the conductors of valuable intent as opposed to producers of generated design.
And so do you think that we will ever get to the point where generative AI is so sophisticated that it does start to take on the art part of design, or do you think it always lives in this sort of process and workflow area?
I love that question because I think the answer is it can absolutely go either way. It's just what is the core ethics of, or the intent, is one of my favorite words talking about AI, is what do you want to get out of it? I do think that as AI evolves, we're going to start seeing things like another UX principle that gets added to the 10 laws that we have right now about intent-driven design and how that intersects the decisions we're making. But I also think that intent will feed into the art eventually, and it'll be more part of this collective mindset. I think we're going to ultimately grow with our design maturity as a general community. And so people are going to start taking us designers a lot more seriously, a lot more quickly. I know I've struggled with that throughout my career, being like, hey, pay attention to this is real. And then they come back after facing the consequences of their own actions and being like, okay, you were right. But I think it's going to be a paradigm shift that we just have to hold on for. I apologize, it's not like an answer, but we've seen AI change the world in ways that we didn't expect. So sometimes I hesitate to speculate so far into the future because I want it to be what it needs to be, and I want to go with it where it goes valuably.
I want to talk about careers. You mentioned the inflection points in your careers. You are both women executives. You work in sports and technology, both industries that traditionally have not been especially hospitable to women at the very top of the organization. And I want to talk a little bit about how you got here. Gillian, you kind of manifested your role at the LA Clippers. Tell us a little bit about how you landed your job.
Well, I think it started early in that when I was a senior in Hamilton College, I decided because of an internship that I had in minor league hockey that one day I wanted to run a professional sports franchise, which was not only a non-traditional career, but especially non-traditional for a woman when I graduated in 1990. So
what was your degree in?
It was in creative writing. So I have always brought a creative bend to everything I do. So I had to think about, okay, how am I going to go about putting myself in a position where I would actually be qualified to do this job, because I knew I would have to do this job really, really well to achieve my goal. So I started kind of moving around the sports industry. I like to say I've worked in almost every sport. I started in hockey, went to football, went to baseball, was in motorsports with NASCAR, and then moved into basketball finally. But I was living here at the time. I had worked in basically every part of the business possible. So I had sold tickets, programs, sponsorship, hats and t-shirts and everything that you could possibly imagine. And then I had also done a lot of the management capabilities, operations, built some racetracks and some stadiums. And so I had this like very broad base that I felt like had me ready for this day when I'm driving home from work and I hear on the radio that Steve Ballmer is buying the LA Clippers. And I thought, oh, he's going to be looking for somebody to be the president of that team, and that is my job. So I was completely convinced it was my role. I started calling everyone I knew, saying, do you know Steve Ballmer? And most of them were saying no, or I've seen him, or I pass him, or he is involved with our bank, or whatever it happened to be. And I just said to everyone, if you see him, tell him he needs to meet me. I have an unusual name. I knew if he heard it enough that he would remember it. And then he did, about, I don't know, a month later, decide that he was going to post the job for president of the Clippers. And when he did, he had a process. He's very process-oriented. He had a process. He was going to meet people who are in the job, have done it before, who do it really well, and are considered best in class, to see what that looks like, not people necessarily looking for the job. Then he was going to meet people who were ready for the job with that exact experience. And then lastly, in his third bucket, he was going to meet with people who had relevant experience but hadn't actually been the president of an NBA team. So I'm in bucket 3 and trying everything I can do to get into bucket 2 or 1. Very unsuccessfully. Now that I know him, I know you don't mess with process. It's very good. But when they did eventually get to bucket 3, the recruiter likes to tell me that she didn't even say, okay, we're in bucket 3 and our first candidate is, and he said, I know. So I was just completely convinced that if I could get him to sit down with me and that we could have a conversation, that he would hire me. And that's exactly what happened, and here we are almost 11 years later. Thank you.
It's a great story, and there are a lot of lessons in all of that for everyone here. Maria, what drew you to a career in design, and specifically, how did you end up in UX?
So I also have a creative degree. So my degree is I have a bachelor's of fine arts with a focus in editorial and print design because I was obsessed with being, the idea of being a designer of infographics at The Economist, a very specific job role that I wanted. So I did as anyone would do in this space. I started doing marketing design for like on-site advertising, like little banners and stuff. So I just started, building my portfolio. I did a lot of nonprofit work, Susan B. Anthony House, AmeriCorps, American Cancer Society, and I was like, okay, I have some foundation on a resume, so I decided with 3 suitcases, $300, that I was going to move to Seattle. So I left home. I'm from Western New York without a job, and by the time I landed in Seattle, I had a job at a Blue Nile jewelry company. That was one of the moments where I met somebody who told me about this thing I'd never heard of before called UX design. And he's like, hey, let me tell you about this thing, because you think a little bit differently. So that was an inflection moment in my life where someone was like, hey, this is this thing that exists that's super new. People are just starting to talk about paying attention to it. And I just kept bumping into it. I'm somebody who will kind of realize through a theme is I love being wrong and making things and trying out and swinging the idea bat and seeing why not and what if. So I had a lot of why not and what if moments through my career. I did a lot of things. I did a lot of contract work to see where I fit. And this person who told me about UX kept coming back into my life and throwing me into a bigger pool. He's like, hey, this is UX. Hey, meet this person who eventually became my manager. Hey, I'm moving to San Francisco and I need you to take over being a professor for information architecture. And I was like, okay, I'm not ready for it. He goes, no, you are. And it was really great and wonderful, and it started to open up all of these things that I realized were so perfect for me. So I got to where I am without any plan to ever actually be here. But I kept asking what if and why not, and much like Gillian, I manifested the role that I'm in now. This role didn't exist 4 years ago, and I just said, hey, we need to start paying attention to infrastructure and networking at Amazon, and everyone's like, okay. And I was like, no, let me explain why. And so then we started, they're like, okay, I believe in you, here's 4 headcount, and 4 years later, we have 20 people across 47 products and 28 services. We have, people in 3 different countries, or people on my team in 3 different countries, and now we're in these core decisions about where the internet is going. Just because 4 years ago I said, hey, so what if we started to actually design for how our engineers think?
As you said, you both have creative backgrounds. What advice do you have for the creative people in the audience about how to navigate the world of business? Because you work for very, very serious institutions that take the profit and the bottom line very seriously. Gillian, I'll start with you. If there's a creative in the room who's saying, I really want to make it in business, what advice would you give them?
I mean, I think there are a few things that are just like the general metrics that any business is evaluated on, right? It's always like finding ways to be more efficient. So how can you do more with less? Or how can you, sort of take what you have and make it work harder for you? I think that those things are things that in a creative aspect, creative people are very good at doing. How do you take something that you're working on and be able to do it faster so that you have more room to do something that's unexpected? So that's the second piece, is if you can bring an answer to something that hasn't been asked yet, it gets a lot of attention. And I think those are 2 spaces where creative people thrive.
Maria?
Some of the advice I'd give you is, oh gosh, there's so much. Relationships and like the person foundation and those conversations you have. I know I joked when I said my favorite productivity tool is a cup of coffee because it helps me learn more about my team. But I think so often that just having the space to work with somebody and have the idea sessions, the conversations, again, swinging the what if bat, is something that so many people feel nervous about because they want to be right when they go to senior people or the people that they perceive as leads around them. They want to be seen as innovative and groundbreaking, but there's so much groundbreaking that we've yet to do that I think sometimes just your questions will do that, and that you'll have these great conversations with your seniors and your leads and your principals that are just like, what if? What if we did this? Why don't we think this way? Some of my favorite conversations I've had on my team are people who come in from such diverse industries like finance and healthcare and car sales. Even when they come into AWS thinking about it, they're like, well, what if we think about it this way? What if we think about it like how you do a buying experience at a car dealership? Why don't we test drive certain? And I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting how to think about that. So just, don't be overly beholden to your industry jargon, your industry expectations. Reframe your ideas in diverse ways. Maybe take a story, build a story, use AI to generate a narrative that helps you communicate your idea. So, yeah.
And Maria, you have launched a conference called UX by UX,
Yes.
Specifically for early career designers. Can you just talk a little bit about what the purpose is there?
Yeah, so UX by X was founded 4 years ago on the premise of we want people like you all who are in the jobs, doing the jobs, producing assets, having these late deadlines, and having a conference of people just like you that are sharing what I like to call their learnings and their burnings. Because we go to these conferences, and I know that's a little ironic, but we have all these people who are kind of like, been there, done that, let me tell you about what happened in my life. But there's so many people who are like, I'm doing this now, and this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it, these are the ways I'm thinking about it. So it's more like relevant to the immediate moment in the industry, and so we want people to see themselves in the stories on the stage. So we just started putting it together and making it happen. And we had companies like SAP and Copperleaf and Arterix. Salesforce came, obviously Amazon with my team, and so we just started talking about what we're doing in the industry. So we grew 1 year to another year to the 4th year, and now we're going to we've been in Vancouver, British Columbia, and so we're just these people who are doing the craft and teaching the craft and saying, hey, I messed up really big on this project. Let me tell you in 20 minutes about what I learned from it. And I think that's super special, and people have been responding to it really well and positively.
And it's really important for designers to know how to present, for sure.
Oh, yes.
I want to talk about leading through change, since that's the topic of our panel. But before we do that, I want to ask each of you to talk a little bit about what kind of leader you think you are, especially given your backgrounds and the way that you came into leadership. Gillian, if someone asked you, what kind of leader are you, what would you tell them?
I mean, I would say, first of all, the type of leader I am today is different than the type of leader I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years before that. It's something that I think you have to be constantly practicing, because leading teams is hard. And as new generations come in, you have to change the way that you speak to people, the way that you integrate with people. There was a time early in my career where I remember there was actually a sign on the chairman's office door that said, nobody cares, which basically meant like nobody cares what's going on in your personal life. Nobody cares that your dog was sick this morning, or your child was sick this morning, or whatever it is that's happening. That would never fly today, right? You would never, I mean, when you think about that, you're like, what a terrible thing to have on there. But at the time, it was kind of glorified. So, what I feel about leadership is that you have to really be working on it all the time. And I spend a lot of time investing in how do you continue to motivate people? How do you motivate different generations? How do you talk to people in different ways? The biggest piece of that, especially when you're trying to do bold things that have never been done before, or you're really trying to get people into a growth mindset, is to create a safe space for people to fail. That it's okay if you try something and it doesn't work. And there are a lot of companies that say they do that, but the reality of it is you have to demonstrate it. People always talk about culture, and if you look at cultures, they all basically say the same thing. But what culture is how you act when something happens that's within your stated mission. So for us, when somebody tries something and it doesn't work, we sit down and we talk about it. And we very, very honestly say, this is what happened, this is why it happened, this is what I thought would happen. It didn't. I feel really awful about it. And then we say, okay, now what are we all going to do about it? People don't lose their jobs over that, but bringing that mindset and that spirit is something that's like my obligation to provide the space to do.
Maria, how do you lead, and maybe talk a little bit about how your experience as a designer and as a creative influences the way you lead?
So I'm a very people first, much like Gillian, I'm a very people first leader. I spend a lot of time getting to know each person on my team and what motivates them, because the way I lead and motivate one person is going to be very different how I lead and motivate another person. And I want to do the best that I can for them so that then they can go forth and force multiply and lead their spaces respectively, because each person is like an ideal leader in theirs. As a designer, because I've held every single job on my team, from a production designer to UX designer to UI to web to content to kind of everything in between, and kind of faked few of them on a resume when I was younger, don't tell anybody. I understand, I build that trust with them so that they trust that I understand when I'm in the leadership spaces, and I can defend on how long it takes a campaign or a website or a console to design to happen. And I feel personally victimized by 2 words in executive meetings, and it's just and only. And it's only a console. It's just designing a web page, and I go, pause. And my team knows that I can speak to, like what actually goes into it, how we're doing heuristics evaluations, how we're doing concept validation, user interviews, data synthesis, hypothesis testing. And they're like, okay, Maria gets it. Because I've proven to them in those intimate getting to know you sessions that I can produce and design and talk and think in a way that you will trust and respect in the future.
Gillian, earlier you talked about how quickly technology was changing and how important it was to sort of be adaptable and flexible to stay ahead of that. It's not just technology that's changing so fast. We live in a world of such great uncertainty. How are you leading in an environment where every day is different from the next?
We have this absolutely phenomenal human resources team, and I don't know how they do all of the things they do, but they basically spend a lot of time with people in the organization and say, like, what else could we be offering that would provide you with, you know, a space where you feel respected, where you feel safe, where you feel like you could be your best self and you could bring that every single day. And once a week, we get something called HR Happenings, and every week, it never ceases to amaze me how many things we have going on, how many resource groups, how many educational opportunities we have, the types of benefits that we're bringing. And then you start to see some of these things come to life and the whole office knows about them. We just had somebody who had their first child that they conceived through IVF because of a benefit that we provided for them that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to access. Like, things like that are celebrated across the company, and it makes people feel like a real connection to the organization as if we're human. And I think that doing those things, understanding what they are and continuing to do that, and then relying on the whole company to communicate the messages is something that becomes very, very powerful.
Maria, you work at a company that is driving a lot of the technological change that all of us here are managing through. Do you have any tips or advice on how to stay abreast of technological change and how leaders and people in the audience can really stay ahead of things?
Yeah, I think the best advice I can have is to find as many educational opportunities as you want, build your network, find peers here that maybe you've never met before, read articles, kind of see what's going on, come to conferences like this or mine. But learn just what people are doing and ask them, there's no wrong questions. Be the least interesting person at a dinner party because you're asking everybody else questions. Be the least interesting person at a networking event because you spend so much time learning about those people around you. There's a podcast that I love called Ologies, and her tagline is "Ask smart people dumb questions." And I love that so much because you guys are such smart people and you do things that I could never dream. So be like, oh, well, what do you like? What do you do? Like, what is this tool? Like, what is this thing? How do you, like, I love the question, what's your favorite productivity tool? Maybe that's the best icebreaker that's ever existed. And that's how I would say, just like learn what's happening around you because I know this is Canva, but in like 2016, I was on a Figma beta, like way back in the day, just because I asked somebody, I'm like, what tools are you testing or exploring? And somebody's like, oh, let me send you this invite. And it was a thing that helped me trajectory into another space because I kind of became an expert in the tool that nobody was using at the time. And so I could put professional relevant experience, Figma, and everyone's like, what, how? It's only been out for a year. I'm like, well, actually it's been out for 5. So just stuff like that, it would be really, find the human connections, ask smart people dumb questions.
We have time for one more question. Your worlds sort of intersect when it comes to, I'll call it users in your world, fans in your world. And I sometimes feel like even in this day and age when people are customer obsessed, companies don't do enough to sort of listen to and enhance the experience for their customers or fans. So I guess I'd ask each of you, what are the things that companies can learn from listening to their communities? Gillian, I'll start with you.
Well, you can learn a tremendous amount, but I don't think it's like an either or. I don't think of listening as being something where you're having a conversation the way that we are now, although that's one tool. Really, all of the different types of surveys that we send and data and social listening tools and all of those things are what give us like the full picture of actually what's going on. Because in our business, somebody has an issue, they become very vocal, and then you think, oh my gosh, this is this massive thing, only later to find out it happened to one person. So like really being careful on how you understand that, and I think all of that sort of boils down to data. So all of the information that we take, that we get from our events, that we learn about our fans, go into a CRM system that allows us to be able to cut and slice it in a million different ways. And that enables us to really see like, what are the real issues here that we need to tackle, as opposed to honing in on something that seems like it's a big deal because of a certain situation that maybe wasn't great, but isn't something that's broad scale.
What's the funniest thing that has ever popped up on your screen from a fan?
Oh my God, I don't even know if I can.
Is it a Whittigit?
We did have somebody who tried to bring their support goat into the building. So they had this little baby goat, and they walked into the building with it and claimed it was a support animal. And we had a pretty good answer because at the time, Kawhi Leonard was playing with us. He still is, but he had just come off of an MVP year, and we said, we already have enough goats here.
That's pretty good. Maria, close us out. What are the things that people can learn from good UX?
Oh my gosh, from good UX, you can learn. You'll notice curiosity and question asking is a theme that kind of drives how I operate. So learning when people move between asking questions of your software tools or experiences and answering them is super powerful, because you get to see those moments where their mindsets change. And those mindsets, when they change, is the biggest opportunity to engage our people in a meaningful way. And so, in AWS, most of the time when you build your network, you're like asking a whole bunch of questions, like, what do I need? What infrastructure? How much storage? How much velocity? How many packets do I need to move? And then when they're in moments of duress, they're like, how many packets did I lose? What network went down? Like what? And then that mindset, we had to service them, because so much of our tools are based on asking questions. But when we realized we didn't answer enough questions when they needed it in times of duress, we were like, oh, this is a huge opportunity, and we're going to, change the world. And that's kind of the thing that led me to the job that I have now, is being like, hey, everybody, so there's this thing here that we're not addressing at all. And they're like, yes, we are. I'm like, oh, yeah? Let me show you, again, the data on that. That is factually inaccurate. So we were able to really focus in on it, and that's how we got to being one of the most consistent seats at the table for the future of the internet.
So many great nuggets and insights from two tremendous executives who basically created the jobs they have today. I mean, I can go on and on asking you questions. Unfortunately, we've got to make room for the next session. Please give a round of applause to Gillian Zucker and Maria Papaleo. Thank you all for being here.